we can get into it now, talk about, who they've played so far, but I still think this Indiana team's pretty solid. So, you know, I think I think this was a good game for them to have coming in, into this game. So,
Hmm.
how do you see this game, Garrison? Like, what do you think Ohio State should worry about, or what do you think they're going to excel in with the Hoosiers coming into town?
All right, so my worries are our offensive line going against their defensive line. We talked earlier about the production that the run game has been able to produce for the last 2 weeks. 340 yards plus. But we're now about to play the second ranked rush defense in the nation, right behind
Sure.
us. Uh, last
I
week.
also, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No way. No, what were you gonna say?
I was going to say, I think it's also important to note, let's go ahead and just acknowledge the elephant in the room right now. Indiana's schedule, their strength of schedule so far has been very poor. They
Yep.
have played one team so far, that as of right now has a record over 500, and that's Washington, and they're 6-5.
Yeah.
So, a lot of those numbers, some people can say, are inflated because of the quality of competition that they played so far, both offensively and defensively.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that's the only reason why they have good numbers. I think IU's a good team. I really do think they are a good team. So
Yeah.
those defensive numbers, I think there's something there, but I do think it's worth noting who they've played so far. So that's all I wanted to say. Go ahead.
No. So you're gonna learn something about me here. I'm one who does not care for the who played argument. And my reason for it being is that, especially for Indiana, like just sticking to Indiana here, on a normal season, Indiana would probably lose 5 to 6 of these games. But these games are even close. They
I
are
agree with you.
manhandling. They are manhandling everybody.
I agree with you.
Yeah, and
I'm not
mhm.
saying Indiana's a bad team.
Yeah.
They're
Oh no,
undefeated
no.
for a reason. You can
Yeah,
only play who's in front of you.
exactly.
Um, so yeah, go ahead.
But then, so like my worries are like offensive line versus their defensive line. Like, is our offensive line real? Is what we've
Yeah,
seen in the last 2 weeks real, or is it a mirage? Another worry of mine, getting to the quarterback. I think that we're going to stop their run game. And if I was being completely honest with you, I think we're probably going to roll them. I really do. But at the
okay.
same time, that doesn't take away from the fact that Indiana does have players. They brought in guys from the transfer portal that weren't just high end recruits, but they are all guys that produced at the programs they were located at. They have a really good quarterback, a coach of the year in my estimation.
I think
What I
that.
did, I'm gonna make this
Yeah,
last one.
okay.
What I did do though is that I base every thought I have right now of Indiana, I base it off of the Michigan game. And it's not because the Wolverines are some high end team. They suck.
Mm-hmm.
They suck.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the most talented team that they played all season. More so on defense. So what I was doing is that I took whatever I saw Michigan do on defense and what IU did on offense, and I said, okay, now like in my brain, what do I think Ohio State is going to do?
Sure. So I want to. So Steve here has an interesting comment, about James Madison,
Mm-hmm.
who's simply not have enough depth. So to that point, obviously, Kurt Signetti brought a lot of his JMU guys over.
Yep.
I want to say it was like 17 guys that he brought over. And
Mm-hmm.
even though they are from a lower, I don't want to say class of conference, but they
Don't
are in a
say it.
lower. Okay, James Madison doesn't exactly play the highest level of competition in college football.
Right.
They just don't. So, but at the same time, they're still playing D1 ball, and these kids have also played a lot of football. IU has
Yep.
a lot of fifth and even sixth-year seniors out there on the field. that experience counts for something.
It does.
So even if they don't have the top end talent that Ohio State has, I think that experience and you know, with 17 guys coming over, they've got a lot of chemistry too. So I think that experience can really help them in a hostile environment like this. This, make no mistake about it, this is by far the hardest game IU's had to play this year. It's by far
Oh
the
yeah.
toughest environment that they've had to play in this season. But I don't necessarily think that they're going to be shell shocked as soon as they step out on that field.
No, I real quick, I agree with you. I completely agree. I wrote something down here. IU, like when they're away in the first quarter, they only give up 3.3 points per game.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they give on defense, and I mean, yeah, I think, yeah,
and that's a concern with Ohio State. I mean, we just saw them go scoreless against Northwestern, and Northwestern's a much worse opponent.
mm-hmm.
I do think this game, I do think this game is going to be a tough one early. Part of the reason for that is the fact that IU's coming off a bye week. They were able to rest up a bit, really study some film, and get a game plan for how they want to attack the Buckeyes. And part of what they're probably going to do, they saw Northwestern do. They want to keep the ball away from the Buckeyes offense. They want to have a high time of possession, and they want to keep it away. Now, IU is also a very high scoring offense when they want to be. They put up a lot of points. They put up, I think it's about 42 points a game.
They know they can put it on you, they will.
Exactly. So with Ohio State, coming off, I wouldn't say an easy game against Northwestern, and with how they've had the notorious issue of starting slow, I think this is going to be a game in the first half. I would not be surprised to see a tie ball game going into halftime, going into the locker room. Now, the second half is where things, I think, change. I think Ohio State, the depth of talent they have is just far greater than anything that IU has. And, this comment here, they're going to try to pass all over us. They definitely are. Curtis Rourke, again, I know I talked about their lack of competition that they face so far. Curtis Rourke is no joke. He has been an efficient passer. He is someone that, again, has a lot of experience out there. He's one of those JMU transfers. And I don't think he's going to be intimidated going to play the shoe, playing in the shoe in front of a raucous crowd. I mean, he's got 21 interceptions. He's got 21 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions. That's on par with what Will Howard's doing. So if Ohio State is going to win this game, they're going to need to play a lot better in the secondary than what we've seen. And they're going to need to be able to get some pressure on the quarterback. Now, they don't necessarily have to garner a lot of sacks, but they've got to get some pressure in Rourke's face, make some of those throws a little bit harder, and really make those windows tight for him, because he'll carve you up all day if he's got, a 2-3 yard cushion between his receivers and the next closest defender.
Ryan, I'm looking at it right now, man. I mean, Elijah Tarrant, 18 yards, average 18 yards per catch. Amar Cooper Jr., 22. That's if you read that as a Buckeye fan, knowing what we've seen on the deep passes this year defensively, that's gonna put some fear in you if we don't get to quarterback. It's going to.
Yeah, this Indiana team, I don't think is someone. I don't think it's a team that you can take lightly, and I don't think Ohio State is. I mean, they're ranked 5th. They have for a reason. They haven't lost a game yet. And by the way, I misspoke earlier. Curtis Rourke is from the University of Ohio. He's not one of those JMU transfers. But again, I think his experience and the overriding experience that this team has specifically on offense, I think is going to give Ohio State some issues. Now, I know I mentioned I think it's going to be a tie ball game going into halftime, or I wouldn't be surprised to see it be a tie ball game at halftime. I do think by the end of the game, it ends up being a double-digit victory for Ohio State, just simply because of that overriding talent. I think
Yeah.
the run game specifically, I do think Ohio State will wear down the Hoosiers up front. The environment, I think, will start to get a little bit juiced up, especially if there are some anxious fans in the stands, if it's a close game at halftime. Um, I don't see this Indiana team quite being ready for the big stage of knocking off a top 2 Ohio State team on the road. Now, I still think IU would probably make the playoff if they, lose by, 10 or fewer points to Ohio State. We can talk about that a little bit later, but
Yeah.
I still think that this is a victory that Ohio State should have. What do you think?
I tend to agree with you in thinking that most of the first half is going to be close, and that's without taking away any turnovers, stupid penalties or things like that. But I agree that in the second half, I think this game gets not out of hand, but it gets blown apart simply because of depth, just as you said. Like I said earlier, I took a lot of things away from that game last week that they played against the team in Ann Arbor, and what I mostly saw was that their offensive depth isn't as good as Michigan's defensive depth. I think that it's going to be the same for this. And the only thing was they couldn't score on Indiana. That's not the same case for Ohio State.
Yeah, Michigan's offense is really, really bad.
It's god awful. Like I told you about the first quarter stats, but then I also looked at the third quarter because I think that's the most important quarter of the game. So Ohio State averages 12.1 points per game in the third quarter. Indiana's at 8.7. But they also give up 4.1 while Ohio State gives up 0.9 on the third quarter. I think when that happens, especially if Ohio State defers to start the game, I think that's exactly where the game gets out of hand.
Yeah.
I think that if Indiana sees themselves go down by, let's say, 2 scores, and if Ohio State's hitting on all cylinders, I think at that point they have to know that they're either not going to be able to get back in this game, or they're going to press. I think that's what's more likely going to happen. None of these guys have been in a big game this year. Not one player on Indiana. Ohio State's been to Oregon. They went to Penn State. They've already been to the 2 toughest places to play in the Big Ten, without question.
And you didn't misspeak there. 2 of the toughest places to play in the country.
Yeah. I stand by that. So it's I think Warwick is good enough to keep them to make them competitive throughout the whole game. Because I do believe you can be down by 3 touchdowns and still be somewhat competitive. I do believe that.
Well, and especially with the secondary that Ohio State has thrown out there, as we talked earlier with the Northwestern recap, some of the corners didn't play particularly well. But Steve here seems to think that Will Howard will play his best game of the year.